It's the Underdogs back with you for another week, a special week. It is week 1 in the NFL. I'm ready for football. Peter, how about you?
I just smell the mud, Jordan. We're all ready. Stuck in our cleats already.
Well, I am Jordan Brenner. That is Peter Keating. It is our 2024 NFL Underdog Spectacular Preview. So, PK, here's how I want to do this. And I know you want to do it this way too, because we had a pre-show meeting and I'm not just making this up on the fly. So we're going to go, division by division. We're going to start on the NFC. We're going to talk briefly about who we like to win each division. And then any sort of underdog or surprise storyline we can see. And then we're going to give you a bet we like in each division. That work, bud?
Sounds outstanding.
All right. So, in honor of our fandom and that of our esteemed producer, Sarah McCrory, who just said her goal for the Giants season is simply to have a will to live.
To maintain the will to live, yes.
Let's start with the NFC East. So, Peter, I assume we're both picking the Eagles to win the division?
I'm picking the Eagles to win the division. I have a question for you. Do you understand what Dallas is doing? I don't.
No, never.
I don't. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I'd like to know, if they're going to plan on trying to keep Dak, but the Eagles have the talent. The Eagles are on the rebound. What do you want?
All right. So any underdog angle you like in this division, any surprises you see coming?
Not really, because until Washington proves it can actually do something, I'm not going to believe they can do anything. The Giants actually look worse analytically than they do. They look worse on paper than we've heard about them. I think Malik Neighbors is the real deal, but come on. So no, actually, this is pretty chalky, I think.
I feel like I could make a case for the Giants to be better, but I'm just not going to do that to myself.
But then you look at the secondary.
But I'm not going to dismiss Washington quite as quickly, and it kind of makes me feel sick saying that, but as quickly as you, because I think there's a path here where Jaden Daniels is as good as advertised, and there's been a lot of hype about him in the preseason. At the very least, he, if you're a fantasy football fan and you're not at least considering him as a top 10 quarterback, you should be. But I could see this team. Look, teams come out of nowhere every year, and they're probably a year away from really being a dangerous sleeper. But I could see some things breaking right for them. I like some of the moves they've made, and we saw just last year what a rookie quarterback can mean.
Sure, but they still in the prove it to me category, because they've gotten bad quite often in order to get good again and never quite pulled it off. And I've fallen for quarterbacks, I'm fallen for coaches and systems there. Let's see them put together a solid 4 to 6 weeks before we start talking about them as an underdog.
All right. Well, I do have one bet here before we move on to a more interesting division. Okay. So I'm going back to the Giants, and I'm going with their newly acquired running back, Devin Singletary, over 725.5 rushing yards. Last year, 30 running backs cleared that mark. And some facts about Singletary. He's only missed 2 games total in the past 4 seasons. So he has a pretty good track record of health, which I just jinxed. He's beaten this mark 3 years running. It's actually, fun fact, he's got a career 4.6 yards per carry. The Giants don't have anything close to a proven backup. So I think Singletary is in one of those situations where he may get 80-85% of the snaps at running back. He had 216 carries last year. Barkley had 247 for the Giants last year in 14 games.
Right.
And he averaged about 3.9 yards per carry behind a much worse offensive line that had Tommy DeVito at quarterback for much of the season. Whatever you think of Daniel Jones, that's an upgrade. Whatever you think of this year's offensive line, that's an upgrade. So to me, with a better offensive cast all around him, it's just, can Singletary stay healthy, and he should pass this mark. So
the numbers are
actually,
I mean, the over under either suggests that people expect him to get injured or to not be the workhorse. I think they signed him to be a workhorse. I think Giants fans are going to see, even if Saquon has a great year, just what an average running back can do behind an average line, which is pile up some yards.
Yeah. And again, we know that opportunity is the most important thing for running backs, particularly in fantasy. But I typically like to bet unders, especially with running backs, because there's so many ways with injuries and whatnot to hit the under. But I actually like this over. So we can stay on me about this. All right. So let's move to the NFC North, Peter. Make sense of that division, because I see 3 potential playoff teams and maybe a feisty Viking squad.
I see a tighter division, don't you? I mean, I think it's possible to have a better year, not necessarily have a better record. I've been saying for a while that I think Detroit is obviously a playoff team, but had a little bit of good fortune last year. The rest of the division is going to be better. Chicago's obviously improved. And look, I look, the Vikings, it's not going to be a pretty season, but the Vikings are considerably better than the team that ended last season with the walking wounded and replacement guys at quarterback who are horrible, and a secondary that was getting burned. They've addressed all of those needs to the point where their only weak link is unfortunately the quarterback because he got hurt. I think it's like a tight division, don't you?
Well, look, I'm more bullish on Detroit than you are. We've talked about that in previous episodes, but I do think there's two Super Bowl contenders in this division because I think if things break right for the Packers, they absolutely have what it takes to win the NFC as well. I would still take the Lions to win the division. As far as surprises go, I'll let you bring in the Vikings for a second, but we have talked about the Bears. I really do think they have a very good shot at the playoffs. That offense could be explosive. I mean, Caleb Williams looks possibly better than advertised, and that receiving trio of DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen is this team's going to be fun to watch.
When was the last time you were arguing about?
Yeah.
When was the last time you were arguing about which Bear to take as a receiver in your fantasy draft? When has that ever happened? I'm wondering if this is the best receiving core the Bears have ever had. Seriously.
Oh, gotta be.
But
hit us with the Vikings.
Vikings over under win total is 6.5. I'm taking the over. After spending all year talking about how they were really lucky 2 years ago. Last year, they were unlucky. There's a bunch of things that are going to help them at the margins. They have a rest advantage. They have a new kicker who was tremendous when he was in college at Alabama, a rookie. They don't need Sam Darnold to be Kirk Cousins. They just need him to not throw more interceptions and touchdowns, which is what they were doing. And they need Aaron Jones to stay healthy. Aaron Jones, one of their many excellent free agent signings. So while they're building a good defense, they need a mediocre offense, and I think that gets you to more than 6.5 wins. Might not get you in the playoffs.
Yeah, there you go. Well, speaking of mediocre, the NFC South, we have to pick a winner here. I don't like going chalk all over the place here, but I still feel like Atlanta is the best pick here. Just if Kirk Cousins can be a reasonable steward of this offense, then you've got playmakers in Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson. I still have some defensive concerns, but
so you think they're not going to be punished for their weird draft strategy where they had a top pick and didn't use it to address obvious holes on the defense, and they'd use it to draft a quarterback? I mean,
I think they'll be
going to get away with that.
I think they'll be punished, but I think this division is going to go the same way it's been going the past few years, where it's a lot of mediocrity. And I think they could probably get to 9 or 10 wins and win it. But Peter, we both have a couple of surprise teams in this division that we think could at least beat their win totals and maybe in one case challenge Atlanta, right?
We're always talking about how we hit on AFC South teams last year. This year in the weak NFC South, we both like a couple of teams, right? And I will say the Saints are one of the teams that played below their heads last year. Were unlucky, finished 9-8 against a weak schedule, but at 9-8 that should have been 10 or 11 wins with the points they scored and gave up. And Derek Carr had a great last couple of months of the season. And they also kept the free agents they wanted and got rid of the players they didn't. I think they had a good offseason. There is no enthusiasm for this team. It's the least enthusiastic fan base in the whole league, according to ESPN surveys. But again, like with Minnesota, they're better than they appeared last year, and they're carrying that over this year.
What's the total again?
They went 9-8 last year and have an over-under of just 7.5 this year.
All right, so you're taking the Saints over 7.5.
Saints over 7.5.
All right, and I'm going to take last year's worst team, the Carolina Panthers, over 5.5. Look, they were terrible last year, and we have an extended version of this reasoning coming out on The Athletic. But real quick, their Pythagorean record said they shouldn't have been quite as terrible. They should have won 3.5 games, and they were terrible in close games. 2-6 in contests decided by one possession or fewer. Now they've got their rookie quarterback in his second year, and this time he gets to work with Dave Canales, who just turned Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield in consecutive years into productive quarterbacks. So They beefed up the interior of the line, signing 2 guards in free agency. They got Deontay Johnson. I think this team isn't – look, this is not a threat to make the playoffs, but can they win 6 games? Absolutely. So –
yeah, Jordan, how do I know they're going to be better? Because every week last year I thought they were better than they were showing, and I picked them in our underdogs contest for 7 or 8 weeks last year. And they kept being worse than they kept playing worse down to numbers that didn't even exist. It was crazy, but there's more talent there. it's hard to go from, where they were to the playoffs, but it's hard to get to that 7 or 8 win range where anybody can win. But yeah, 6 wins seems doable.
All right. Well, we've been pretty good at these picks for what it's worth the past couple of years. Like Peter mentioned, we nailed the Colts and the Texans as our big turnaround teams last year. The year before it was the Giants and the Lions.
Giants and the Lions.
Let's hit on the NFC West very quickly before we take a break and go to the AFC. Peter, any reason not to pick the 49ers to win this division?
No. We're doing it quickly. The answer is no. We have doubts about how many wins they can actually achieve. Can you keep winning 13 games a year? Probably not. But no, they should be the overwhelming favorites in this division.
All right. And then I'm going to hit on a surprise team with our bet right here. The Cardinals. First of all, the market's not even sure what to make of them because some of the books have over 6.5 as the main line, but there's a lot of juice on that, like -150, -160. Some have over 7.5 at plus money. Let's use the over 6.5 for now. They were 4-13 last year. Now you've got a full season of healthy Kyler Murray. They were 1-8 with Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune at quarterback before he came in. Then they went 3-5 the rest of the way, and they increased their scoring from about 15 points a game to about 22 points a game. Now they've got him a receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. They've made additions on the offensive line, and they fixed the defense a little bit with 2 defensive tackles, linebacker, corner, and Sean Murphy bunting. This team was unlucky last year in terms of games lost due to injury. So give me the Cardinals over 6.5 wins as our surprise team there. We're back, and let's head over to the AFC, starting in the East. Peter, it's really a 3-horse race, very tight odds to win this division. The Jets are plus 165. Imagine the Jets being a favorite to win anything. The Bills are plus 195. The Dolphins plus 205. Which of those 3 are you hitching your wagon to?
I think the Bills are going to suffer more than people realize from the loss of Diggs, and I like Miami's offense a whole lot. Tua stays upright. I love that team.
Look, the Jets have the most talent top to bottom, but I don't want to pick the favorite, and B, I don't feel good ever picking the Jets. So I'm going to go against you and say the Bills are somehow going to figure this out and prove that Stefon Diggs was on his last legs there, that Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman can carry the torch, and that Dalton Kincaid is going to emerge as a top 3 tight end in the league. So nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Peter, the surprise teams, obviously the New England Patriots are going to win the division, right?
It's an enjoyable spectacle to see where they are right now, isn't it?
I mean, are there any surprises you can even foresee in this division? Like, is anyone going to be much? I guess you think the Bills could be much worse than possible. I don't think either of us think the Patriots could be better than advertised.
No, I don't think the Bills will be much worse. I do worry about Aaron Rodgers and injury concerns. I mean, I worry if he's going to stay healthy. I mean, there's a lot of light riding for that team on that one player.
Well, here's a fun bet to make if you believe he's actually going to stay healthy, okay? Garrett Wilson, Jets wide receiver, uber talented, has never played with a quarterback. He's plus 1,300 to lead the league in receptions. Fun fact, last year he was 4th in the NFL in targets, only 13 behind CeeDee Lamb for the league lead, but he had like 40 fewer catchers than CeeDee Lamb because Zach Wilson and company were trying to throw him the ball, okay? He only caught 95 passes. So if we assume they're going to target him at least as much, and I think so, and in fact, if the offense is better, there should be more total plays, so he might even get more total targets. And if we think that Aaron Rodgers can at least throw the ball accurately to him more than those guys did, then I think getting plus 1,300 odds on him to lead the league in receptions is a pretty good bet.
Look, offense is not a zero-sum game. You keep the ball, you keep moving the chains, you can get more possessions, more receptions, more yards. That's what's going to happen with some of these guys on the Jets. Excellent. Sure, why not?
All right, cool. Let's do it. AFC North, Peter. You've got the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers, the Bengals. Last year, this division had everyone finished over 500. 3 of the teams won 10 or more games. How do you break this down?
I like Baltimore. They had a point differential of almost 200 points, or I think more than 200 points last year. Still gave up the fewest points in the league. Lamar had an MVP season. They're well coached. They play hard. They signed Derrick Henry. Why the hell not? Pittsburgh is a little bit smoke and mirrors. And I have some concerns about Cincinnati. They had some good luck last year. I also want to make sure Burrow's healthy and stays healthy with that line in front of him. And Jamar Chase just reported to camp. So I hate to go complete chalk, but Give me the Ravens there.
Yeah, well, they and the Bengals are co-favorites at plus 145. I've been thinking a little bit about the Browns at plus 550 to win the division. And while I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger on that one, I do think people are sleeping on them a little bit just because, I don't know, because Nick Chubb's not healthy. This defense is really good. Eh, Obviously, it comes down to Deshaun Watson. Is he as bad as he looked last year, or with another full year in his return from the contract and the behavioral issues and everything else? Is there still something left with him?
Did you say plus 550?
550 to win the division, yeah.
So I can't really assess it in terms of those odds,
Right.
what Watson's impact is, but I think there's a much better chance that he's shot completely than that he's going to return to anything like he was 5 or 7 years ago.
All right. We got a bet here that
Yes. Look, it's hard to pick guys who have any kind of plus money on the Ravens. This isn't a plus money bet. This is an over under. But Zay Flowers, 925.5 yards. Give me the over. Had
Okay.
108 targets last year at almost 8 yards a target. You do the math. Gives up to 120 targets, which was well on pace to achieving second half of last year. Here's the thing about Flowers, okay? He was a top 10 receiver in win rate against man coverage and against zone coverage. All the stuff about him being a great route runner is completely true. And Lamar, Jackson threw 28 times a game last year. There's room for that number to go up. So I think he's on the verge of, I think he already broke out. He's on the verge of much bigger numbers. Zay Flowers, 925.5. Give me the over.
All right. The AFC South, where we made hay last year with our awesome Texans and Colts picks. I wonder if the Texans might come back to the pack a little bit, if there's a little bit of a post-hype fade here. On the other hand, that offense looks like it could be ready to roll. How do you suss this division out?
Well, it's an interesting. On one hand, you may have an emerging Hall of Fame quarterback. On the other hand, when you improve as much as the Texans did in 1 year, as they did last year, it's extremely difficult not to plexiglass a little, not to bounce back. Everything went so right. Things just can't go that perfectly all the time. And I think that Jacksonville's going to give them a run for their money.
Oh my God, are we making the same pick? I too will take the Jaguars at plus 250 to win the division. I think there's better odds than that. To be fair, everything was so positive about the Texans. Everything was so negative with the Jaguars, and the Texans still only won one more game than the Jaguars last year.
So you know what? You taking is that your bet plus 250 to win the division? How about Brian Thomas Jr. at plus 700 to lead the league in receiving touchdowns? Now look.
Ooh.
He's not among rookies. Okay. Among rookies. Now look, he's not Neighbors. He's not Odunze, but look, Trevor Lawrence throws for
that Harrison guy is pretty good too, by the way.
And he's pretty great. Trevor Lawrence throws for 4,000 yards when he's injured. He throws long, and he's first in the league in what Pro Football Focus calls big time throws. That's throwing downfield into tight windows. Look, Brian Thomas, he's an LSU guy. He's tall. He gets separation. And I mean, what's not to love? There's great value.
Here's what's not to love: target competitions. Whereas the Giants are going to throw the ball to Malik Neighbors every play. Same with the Cardinals and Marvin Harrison.
Yes,
you're competing in Jacksonville with Evan Engram, with Christian Kirk, with the newly signed Gabe Davis.
Okay, well, Christian Kirk has only appeared in games in 3 wide receiver sets in the preseason. Yes, Gabe Davis is starting on the other side. Let's see him. I mean, I think they drafted Thomas to do what Gabe Davis should have been doing all along in his career. And Evan Engram is not going to continue to be the deep threat for that team, because they have a deep threat now. The deep threat's going to score some touchdowns.
All right.
It's plus 700. It's plus 700. Come on. Let's give it a real underdog bet, Jordan. Come on.
Well, last and least, if you're talking about teams who aren't the Kansas City Chiefs, it's the AFC West. Peter, am I even going to bother have you make the case that someone other than the Chiefs is going to win this division?
No, although I think the Raiders are due for a little bounce back, a better luck. I know the quarterback is mediocre at best, but I don't hate that team. I think they have some interesting talent on that team. And whatever they can do to bolster that team, they're going to do, because otherwise Devontae Adams is leaving.
I think there is some talk about the Chargers just in terms of coaching, and you've got a great quarterback in Justin Herbert, that they can overcome a lot of the weapons they've lost. But still, this team, I don't know. Is Harbaugh going to be able to fix everything in the trenches that quickly too? I don't know. I just don't. I don't have a great feeling about them. I mean, the odds it's the Chiefs are minus 260 to win the division. Then the Chargers are plus 350, and it jumps all the way to the Raiders at plus 1,000 and the Broncos at plus 2,200. I'm also hearing a lot about, well, Sean Payton's teams always overachieve. They always beat expected win totals. We talked about why they could be under 5.5 this year, but a lot of people I respect are giving the benefit of the doubt to Sean Payton. I don't think that's earned given just how talentless that roster is.
This roster is stripped. And if you find interesting bets like teams that won't score a touchdown in a month, or teams that might go 0-17, or some crazy odds and stuff like that, I think Denver, more than New England, is the best candidate for loser bets.
All right. Well, speaking of loser bets, I came up with one final fun loser bet for this division, okay? If you parlay the Raiders, the Broncos, and the Chargers all to miss the playoffs, you come to plus 145 odds. So you could do that at DraftKings.
On how many teams are we parlaying here?
The three non-Chiefs teams.
The three non-Chiefs teams, and it's still just plus 145. Right. Okay.
So I didn't see anywhere where I could bet under 1.5 teams to make the playoffs. So I did this on my own again. Plus 145, Raiders, Chargers, and Broncos all to miss the playoffs. You with me?
I'm there. Yes.
All right. Excellent. Well, before we switch gears and tell you about something that we got perfectly right, real quick, Peter, Super Bowl pick. Who you got?
I'm going back with Baltimore again. I think the runner-up teams are charged up, and if they stay healthy, I mean, come on, we can't keep picking the same teams every year.
I'm going to keep picking the same teams every year. Even though I told you a couple weeks ago why I think they could go under their regular season win total, I do think the San Francisco 49ers are the best, most talented, most well-rounded team in football.
They're a machine.
And I'm going to stick with them to win the Super Bowl this year. And we're ready to nail it once again. Think you can nail it? Head over to our friends at DraftKings for the best odds and lines, especially on futures markets. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code Underdogs, our show, in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours. Peter, there's nailed it, and then there's nailed it. And man, did we nail it when it came to the Olympics.
Jordan, in the old days, we would have said we did this on the back of a cocktail napkin at a bar. It wasn't quite like that, but you and I basically said right here on this table using these spreadsheets, how can we concoct an Olympic medals projection system that other researchers and research companies charge thousands, if not millions of dollars to come up with? And we put together a huge boatload of data, which I want to thank you again. You collected, I believe, almost all of it, looking at all these possible factors. Ran some numbers, looked at what was significant, put the numbers together, then put some X factors in to allow the model to learn from its under or over estimates. And we came up with a medal projection system that, might I say, nailed it. Here we go. These were our predictions for the Olympic medal standings. Number one, the United States with 110 medals fueled by performances among women. We discussed that. Number two, China at 86, 3, Great Britain, 4, France, 5, Australia. Here's the actual top 5 totals. Number one, the United States at 126, 2, China, 3, Great Britain, 4, France, 5, Australia. You can go down to 10. We got 9 of the top 10. So this is what we meant by saying you can use kind of big macro factors to look at how countries are investing in and producing Olympic medalists. We looked at gross domestic product. We looked at population. Sadly, we found that infant mortality rates were also predictive of this. And then once we saw whether those were working or not working, we took the amount by which they were or weren't working and looped that back into the model. So there's something to do with sporting culture too. So the Olympics are full of great underdogs, very competitive performances, but in the big picture, it's rich countries with sporting cultures that have lots of athletes that they produce win the most medals in a very predictable way.
And I liked, again, how home field, home court advantage once again surfaced as a major factor, obviously because you get more teams in general or athletes into certain competitions. But we saw, look at the basketball, how France's men and women rode that wave to the gold medal game and gave the U.S. a run for their money in both contests, right? So it's fun seeing some of these things, like you said, irrespective of who the athletes are, of whether you've got a golden generation of fencers in this country or, you know, another country is knocking on the door in track and field, that by and large, a lot of these things stay steady just by knowing what, you know, the makeup of a country.
And Jordan, one last nailed it. We said Albania might win its first medal because they basically stole wrestlers from the Russian Federation, and they did. Sherman Valiev won the 74-kilogram medal, Albania's first medal ever.